this might get kicked off. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we're going to be doing the quick to judge tag. Alright, so before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what's the last book that you decided to kick off your TBR. Let's talk about that. So this is a tag video, but it's also a companion video to my TBR unhaul I just did recently. I'll put a link to that in the cards up above, but while I was filming that, I went through and made a list of books that I wanted to use for this quick to judge tag, because I was very up in the air on whether or not I wanted to actually still read them or if I wanted to officially kick them off my TBR list. And I thought this would be a perfect tag to kind of pair with that video. So like I said, this is a tag and it was originally created by 𝗖cie RH and I'll put a link to her original video in the description down below. I, however, was tagged by Mimi and I'll put a link to her video in the cards up above. So I've got the 10 books, and then whichever one I end up ranking as the most interesting, I'll end up reading, with the rest of this video being a reading vlog with my thoughts. So in case you didn't watch my TBR unhaul, I will go ahead and list out the 10 books that I am going to be considering in this video. And then, like I said, we're gonna read the first paragraph of each of them and rank them 1 to 10. So starting at the top is Speak by Laurie Anderson. This one has been on my TBR for quite some time because it is a hard-hitting young adult novel. And though I have really been pulling away from YA, I do still tend to have interest if they are hard-hitting and tackling some heavier topics, which is why this one has stayed on my list for as long as possible. But I'm pulling back from YA even more now, so I'm really not sure if this is still gonna have the same impact that it would have if I read it when I was like 15. And then I've got The Library of Fates by Aditi Khurana, which is a YA fantasy story that has basis in Indian mythology. In this, it looks like we're following Amrita, who ended up sacrificing herself by offering to marry this emperor, but unfortunately that kind of ends up imploding, and so she is actually now a refugee on the run, but takes along an oracle who the emperor had been utilizing as a slave. The two of them end up relying on each other to try and bring this emperor down. I mean, it does sound very YA fantasy, but the fact that it has basis in Indian mythology is really interesting. I do tend to love those sorts of stories, and I've never really heard anybody else talk about this one, so I am still very intrigued by it. Next up is The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. This one, I'm pretty sure I added it to my TBR because it was reminiscent of like 𝗖cie by Jennifer Matthew, which is a contemporary story following teenage girls who were just fighting the feminist fight, and that was something I really enjoyed in 𝗖cie. Looking at the synopsis immediately, I can tell I added it because it is specifically looking at culture through a YA perspective. Again, a harder hitting YA, reminiscent of other books I've really enjoyed, but is it still going to hit the way it might have 10 years ago for me? I don't know. Next up, another young adult one, but this one's actually horror, and it is The Dead House by Dawn Kurdagich. I'm sorry, I probably just butchered that. 25 years ago, a school building burned down and multiple people passed, one of which was this girl Carly, and then a few years later, somebody ends up finding Carly's twin sister's diary in the school. But Carly didn't have a twin sister. And I think this is actually told in a multimedia format where through all of these articles, you are figuring out what happened at the school. And this just sounds really interesting. I do tend to enjoy multimedia format stories. And another one that I've really not heard anybody else talk about, so I am still intrigued by it. Plus, it's a YA horror novel, and I do feel like those tend to still do okay for me. So we'll see. Next up is another hard-hitting YA one. This one I actually have heard a lot of positive things about, and that's also helped for it to stay on my TBR list. But it is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. It's following a young Black boy who, unfortunately, even though he is like head of his class, absolutely brilliant, has had no run-ins with the law, ends up getting arrested, and though he's eventually released, it still shakes him to his core, and he really starts to struggle with the prejudices he's going to experience growing up as a Black man. So he begins writing letters to Martin Luther King. Like I said, I've heard a lot of positive things about this one, so I have been very intrigued to pick it up. Plus, it's not really long. It's actually a pretty short book. So this is one where even if it doesn't win like top of the list, if it's like within the top 3, I might still be willing to read this one because it's so short and I've heard so many positive things. Next up is Broken Things by Lauren Oliver, which has always intrigued me because it sounds like a very interesting setup for a YA mystery where we're following these two young girls who were writing a story together, and eventually like the villain character they created is like starting to haunt them almost, and I think one of their friends ended up dead. And so now it's like a few years later and something brings these two back together. It sounds super interesting and really original. I'm very interested by it still. I've also not heard anybody talk about it. I'm intrigued one way or another. This next one, I have gone back and forth on reading this for years, but it is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I'm pretty sure this originally found its way on my TBR because Hannah at A Clockwork Reader loves this book, and I tend to have very similar thoughts to her. But as I've gotten older, I've seen more reviews of this book. I've been a little bit more hesitant. It's another fantasy story with there's this kid who has always been obsessed with this mythical city, and I think he goes on a journey to try and find it. I've heard people say it's actually very reminiscent to The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which is right here displayed on my shelves. So I think you can see I really liked that book, and I'm a little concerned that I'm going to be comparing this to that one the whole time. And seeing as how this is an adult story that I've already read and loved, I don't know if I necessarily need a YA story that doesn't quite hit the same for me. I don't know. We'll find out. Another YA mystery with All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Urban. Fairly certain this one just really reminded me of One of Us is Lying, where all of the main characters are the quintessential high school character archetypes. I don't know why, but kind of reminds me of an episode of Veronica Mars that is not at all the same. There is also a scholarship dinner and there's a lot of drama unpacked. Between that and then the One of Us is Lying comparison, naturally I was intrigued by it. I've still yet to get to it. I don't know, we'll see. Next up is The Society for Soulless Girls by Laura Stevens. This one I don't even remember how it got on my TBR, honestly, but the description of it does sound up my alley. It's a dark academia story where 10 years ago, 4 students ended up dying on their college campus, and now it's just reopened, but there's a woman who is going to be a student there, and she is determined to figure out what happened, but it turns out it's a little fantastical, a little paranormal, and that is interesting. I think this is also sapphic, which makes it more up my alley. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody talk about this, but it's still interesting to me. This one I'm also feeling may stay on my TBR, even if the first paragraph doesn't immediately win me over, because the idea of it is still very interesting. But I also think it'll depend on the writing style for the characters, seeing as how they're supposed to be in college. If they feel like they're in college, that'll probably help. If they don't, this might get kicked off. And then finally, speaking of One of Us is Lying, the third book in the One of Us is Lying series by Karen M. McManus, which is One of Us is Back. Honestly, I don't really think the first book needed sequels. I read the second. It was very similar, but had a little bit of a twist, and it was fine. I liked getting to see more of the characters I loved from the first book. I heard a third book was coming out, but I've yet to actually find out anything about it. Okay, so it's been nearly 2 years in universe since One of Us is Lying took place. Oh, it looks like we may once again be following the main crew from the first book, and somebody has unexpectedly returned to Bayview. Ooh, dramatic. If this gets picked, it'll probably be really difficult to talk about this book without spoilers. So we'll see how that goes. So that is all 10 books that I am considering. Let's go ahead and dive into me reading the first paragraph of all of them. Hello again, friends. So first off, the angle might have changed slightly because I had to read some of these books on my phone, meaning I didn't get them for the fun little B-roll bit. I've officially read the first paragraph of every book, and turned out this is the breakdown we got. Yeah, I think this is a good showcasing of the fact that horror and mystery books do tend to have some really banging starting lines, because all of these were really interesting. And while All Your Twisted Secrets held first place for quite a while, once I read The Dead House, the first paragraph is basically the prologue chapter, and it is a news article telling us about what took place. The school burning down, people being found dead. The belief that the person responsible for it is this girl Caitlin because they found her diary, except that they have no record of a Caitlin at the school, which is very intriguing. To be fair, I went back to All Your Twisted Secrets and reread the first paragraph, and technically it's really more like a first line. So I read the second paragraph as well, and that one did kind of drop the interest. It just, I mean, with the first line, like, I spent the last hour wondering if I would die tonight. I was engaged. That's super intriguing. Yeah, I wanted to know what was going on there. The next paragraph starts to showcase that it's because she's so nervous and anxious for this dinner party. So yeah, that kind of took away from my investment. The Dead House, this is the one that like I pretty immediately want to continue reading. So with that, I will officially be reading The Dead House. I am very excited for this, and I will talk to y'all again when I've officially started into this book. Hey guys, so I've officially started into The Dead House, and I'm actually really liking this pretty immediately. So our main character, Carly, also Caitlin, has dissociative identity disorder, and we're kind of seeing through these multiple different formats how Carly initially created an alter, like the traumatic experience that led to Caitlin's existence, and then like partly how they have continued living and how she utilizes Caitlin as a coping mechanism, which has been very interesting. And it's told in this really cool way where, again, it's multimedia. So like we see how they communicate via like a diary almost. And we see them not only when they're in a mental health facility, but also when they're at school. Caitlin only appears at night, whereas Carly is present during the day, and how they manage to coexist, how things from Carly's life impact Caitlin and things from Caitlin's life impact Carly. It's been really interesting. I'm really liking it, and we finally are starting to kind of set up some spookier things that I imagine are going to lead into what happened to the school where we know 3 people ended up dying. There's already been like little moments here and there where it's kind of making me wonder, is this real, or is this paranormal? Is it actually happening, or is it all in Caitlin/Carly's head? It's been really interesting. And there was one moment, I didn't realize it's also broken up into parts, right before part 1 ended, that was so unsettling and so creepy. It was really good. I'm really liking this. The audiobook is done with multiple different voice actors, and there is a little bit of production sound effects added to it. It's not like quite the same as, say, the Illuminate files, but it does have some additional elements there to really make the audiobook just a even more immersive experience. So I'm really liking it so far. I'm only about 25% in, so I don't have too many thoughts just yet, but I'm engaged and I want to keep reading. And so I'm filming this update so that I can keep reading. Hey guys, so I've hit, I don't know, like I'm gonna say 60-ish% into The Dead House, and I'm really liking this book. I am so glued in. This is wild and confusing and weird. I have so many questions, but at the same time, like, I'm just along for the ride. I think it's really interesting how the author has kind of a countdown going to the night of this event, this tragedy that took place. But at the same time, we have occasional excerpts from afterwards where like the police are investigating certain people. And then we also have just what's going on with Caitlin/Carly. And there's something weird that's happening, but it is very much is this part of Carly/Caitlin's DID, or is something paranormal and scary happening? Because there's little hints to things, particularly around Carly's best friend Nadia. It's like it could be, but maybe not. Like, this might just be high school students being stupid. It might be down to, as I said, Carly's dissociative identity disorder, like perhaps a new alter is becoming present. Like, there's a lot of questions going on, but I'm so interested. And the author has really done a phenomenal job with the tone of the story. It is oppressive and unsettling. When I'm reading this book, I feel like I am on the edge of my seat. I can't get comfortable, but in a way where it makes perfect sense for the story that is being told. And I'm really, really liking it. I'm very impressed at how the author is plotting everything out through these alternate perspectives, alternate timelines, different pieces of media. We have tape recordings, we have diary entries, like we have video footage. It's wild, but it's all coming together slowly, I think. At the same time, like, I have a million questions even now, but I'm really liking it. And I'm very surprised that I've never heard anybody else talk about this, because it's pretty freaking good. I will say I am a little hesitant that part of a twist or reveal will be very reliant on Carly's mental health and her DID.
but I don't know, like there's enough going on externally that it's definitely possible the author will not do that, because she has plenty of different opportunities, plenty of different directions she could be taking the story. Like I think she's done a really great job of that. So you can't quite pick out where this is gonna go. Like I wouldn't even necessarily say she's laying like red herrings. At least at this point, it is very much more that there are just so many different avenues available. And so I'm hoping she doesn't cop out by taking the one that is the most obvious and also the most insensitive of just utilizing Carly's mental health. But I don't know. We'll see. One way or another, I want to keep reading this book.
Hey y'all, so I've officially finished up The Dead House now, and so this book kind of took an unexpected turn in that it was very reminiscent of the last thriller I read that had dissociative identity disorder represented in it, and that book was One of Us Knows by 𝗖cie HİH𝘁. I actually read it for an anticipated releases vlog a while back, so if you're intrigued for thoughts, I'll put a link to that in the cards. Similar to that book, this started out really interesting by having a character with this mental illness. It made me very excited for a change in the perspective of this mental illness that gets villainized a lot of the time in media, especially in a horror or thriller book, because so often this can end up being used as a twist in this very negative way. Also kind of similar to that book, unfortunately, this one did rely on a twist around the character's mental health, but this one did it a lot worse and made it feel so much ickier. The most annoying thing about this book is the fact that I literally was so sucked in. I did not want to stop reading. I was so intrigued. The setup of this, where a person has dissociative identity disorder and their alters come out based on the time of day, that's so interesting. It's definitely not realistic, but like I could move past that for story's sake. As the plot began to unfold, I was very intrigued about this whole like, is it paranormal, is it not element as well, because I tend to love that in my horrors and thrillers. It also made me very excited to see if we were gonna get some more exploration around how Carly developed this coping mechanism. It's barely touched on a little bit, but it's definitely not relevant to the rest of the story. Instead, this took the whole, is it paranormal, is it not, and like amped it up to 10 in the weirdest way that I wasn't anticipating. I still held on for it. I still was hoping I was going to enjoy it because I thought the way this book was being told was so interesting. However, once again, this book unfortunately falls into the trap of villainizing a character who has DID, and it just felt so gross, especially like even more so reading the author's note, because she mentions having a family member who suffers from DID, and like I can't imagine knowing somebody who goes through that and then presenting this in this sort of a way again. Like I said, the duality of Carly and Caitlin's personalities was really interesting. The fact that Caitlin literally only lives her life as a nocturnal person until she is forced to change her ways is very interesting. The interesting setup of this book, though, just got so wasted. The whole, is it paranormal, is it not? It's used in a clever way, but I think because it's used alongside this character who has DID, that's what makes it gross. How it's done is just, it's gross. Along with that, I feel like the only character apart from Caitlin or Carly that really was able to stand on her own was Nadia, I think it was, that was her best friend. Every other character, super forgettable, didn't really feel nearly as necessary to the plot, especially the male characters, because those, not a single one, felt well established, well introduced, and stood on their own in a way where I could confidently say like, ah yes, this is Scott, for example. Like, no, Scott, John, James, whatever their names are, Ari, they all ran together at the end of this book, which is like a real problem because they all become much more relevant at the end of the book. And I had such a hard time remembering who was who and who did what and who was necessary and who was, I had such a hard time remembering who was who and who did what and like who had what relationships with who. It was just not well established to have so many characters suddenly important to the story. In the end, I'm gonna give this like a 3.5 star. And even then, like I actually kind of only want to give it a 3 star, really because the setup of the book was very interesting and the storytelling utilizing this multimedia format was pretty cool. That being said, logic in my brain also can't help but point out that some of the ways the story is presented by using like video evidence doesn't make sense. Like, why would they possibly be videoing some of these scenes? I don't get it. I like this book well enough. I enjoyed maybe like 70% of my reading experience with this one. Am I glad to get it off my TBR? Yes. But does part of me wish I would have gone with a different book off of this challenge? A little bit, I'm not gonna lie to you. But again, at least I knocked some books off my TBR with this. So, on that note, that is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me the house emoji in the comments because it makes perfect sense with the title of this book. I have links to all of my socials in the description down below. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!